Hey guys, and welcome to another episode. Today in this video, I'm going to be installing a short shifter on the Mini. But not just any short shifter, I'm going to be installing an adjustable one. So, if you guys remember from the previous video, we took apart basically the entire interior on the Mini. So if we take a look at the interior, you can tell that we've already got basically most of the interior stripped. Now, to install the short shifter, we don't need it to be essentially at this stage. All that we need to do is essentially remove that center console piece that we had in place right here. Now, with it removed, we have our shifter assembly right here, essentially bare. This is what it looks like. Now, what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be installing this piece right here in that place. So this entire shifter is gonna go there, and then once we have it installed, we can adjust it by just turning this knob and sliding this up and down. Now, in order to replace this, we can't do everything from the top. We need to do some work from the top and some from the bottom of the vehicle. Now, this is essentially a very similar DIY as opposed to the install that we did on my little brother's Golf from his short shifter. So if you guys remember, in order to change that out on his car, when we went underneath, we had to take out the exhaust system. Now, I already jumped the gun, went ahead and took it out, and this is it right here. I use a set of exhaust pliers to pull off the hangers on there and there. And if we move forward all the way to the front, there was a V-band clamp right there. And that's how it held the exhaust system in place. Now, while I was taking it out, the flex pipe that's attached to the pipe right here snapped off. So there's another piece right here on a front engine, front wheel drive car. When the motor is mounted sideways, you're gonna have a flex pipe to allow the engine to rock forwards and backwards and not snap the exhaust system. Now, when I put this exhaust back on, I'm gonna have to get that re-welded up onto the exhaust to get it all to work. But if we move back here, I also had to use the exhaust pliers to push it out from this section. But here's the exhaust system out of the way. Now, with the exhaust dropped, I had to remove this heat shielding, and that essentially covered the bottom side of the shifter. From underneath the car, this is what we should see when we have the exhaust and that heat shield removed. Now, if we take a look at the center of the screen, that little box is essentially where the cables and the shifter mechanism is attached to. Now, there's going to be 4 Torx bolts securing it in place. 2 of those holes at the front have 2 of them in there, and there's another 2 found on the back side of it. Now, once we drop that and take that out of the way, we should be able to get access to the shifter and replace the OEM one with the short throw shifter. So back inside the car, if we take a look at the shifter mechanism right here, there's gonna be a little clip on the bottom of the base of the shifter that we're gonna need to push forward so that once we have those 4 bolts on the bottom of the shifter box cassette, we can push this down and move this out of the way. Now, it's super important that that little clip on the bottom side of the shifter is removed and out of the way, because if it's still hanging on this part of the interior, we won't be able to push the back end down and slide all of this out. Now, the trickiest thing in this situation, when you're working with a car that you have to go from underneath the car to get access to the shifter, this piece right here is going to be your biggest pain in the butt. And this right here is the case for the shifter cassette. So that means that this little piece is what's found underneath the car, and you need to remove each one of these little clips found on the outside perimeter of this thing. And once you move them out of the way, you should be able to pull it down and get access to the underside of the shifter mechanism. Now, with that bottom plate removed, what we're gonna have to do next is we're gonna have to disconnect the 2 cables that are connected up to the cassette box, which are attached to the shifter. So each one of those cables right there with the green dot at the end, the way that we're gonna remove it is we're gonna get a flathead screwdriver, put it on top of each one of those little like socket things up on there, and then pry down on it. Now, both of them should pop out fairly easily. Now, back underneath here, if we take a look at each one of these cables, you can see that they're released from the shifter. Now, I took off both of them so I can take the cables out, and then I can take the entire shifter box and the cassette and everything out of the way. Now, to take these cables out, see those 2 little pieces of metal right there and there? Well, what we're gonna do is we're gonna grab a set of pliers and essentially pull down on that part right there. Now, this is very similar to a brake line that's attached to a car. If you ever changed out brake lines, you just take these out in the exact same way. So I'm gonna be using a set of like pliers like this, pulling it down, and then I'll slide the cable out of here. I'm gonna do that for both of them, and then I'll take out each one of these screws up top, 1, 2, 3, 4, out of here, and the entire shifter will be able to come out. Alrighty, so once we have our entire shifter assembly out of the car, this is essentially all it is. So underneath, you can see there's our little shifter mechanism that we were trying to pry out before. So we've got the entire shifter inside the cassette, and the cassette is this entire base. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna be replacing this entire shifter piece right here with the adjustable one from Craven Speed. Now, this is pretty much the same thing as the stock shifter. However, the difference is you can change where the pivot point is on here. So this is on the ground, this is on like a flat surface. Look at this. This means that you can change how much leverage you want against the transmission. So you can choose if you want a lot of leverage, you can make the shift shorter, or if you want less. It's entirely up to you. And then as soon as you're done, just lock that in place. Now, it's very easy to install. So once you have this out, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to take out and unclip this white part, which is essentially a guide for the shifter. So the shifter goes inside of there, and there's 3 clips found on the white part that we need to pry out and push up. Now, there's a couple different ways that we can get this out. Now, there's some instructions online for this kind of thing, and what they recommend is using a screwdriver to push out the tab. And then once you're at that point, you're gonna wanna use some sort of method to keep it so that little push pin, like the little tab that's sticking in the black part, doesn't push back out. So what I might use is a zip tie. Now, they also recommend you can use like a toothpick. Whatever you can do to get that out is awesome. Now, we're not gonna be reusing this again, so worst case scenario, we can break it, you know, if it comes to it, because we've got a replacement piece right here. And this is a lot nicer than the OEM plastic one. Now, from there, I'll set that aside. From there, with each short shifter kit, you're also gonna get a new aluminum bushing and bolt for the shifter. So around each corner of the shifter, 1, 2, 3, and 4 on the bottom side, there's these little bushings. And right now, they're made out of rubber. Now, every time you shift, these little rubber pieces, they're gonna have a little bit of give. Now, if you want a very precise shift, what we're gonna do is we're gonna pull each one of these little rubber grommets out, each one of the bushings with the bolt, and we're gonna replace it with an aluminum one. So I'm gonna start off by taking out the little white piece around the outside part of the shifter. So there's 3 little push pins, not really push pins, there's 3 little tabs that push out on the black part of the shifter. Now, they say that this is the hardest part to get this out with, so if you can get this part out fairly easily, you're gonna be ahead of the game. So I'm just using a flathead screwdriver and a few picks, and well, let's see how this goes. Now, from the looks of it, it does seem to be pretty brittle plastic, so if you do break it, it's not the end of the world. Okay, so I think I have 1. Oh, had. So yeah, I'm just gonna be pushing them in, pulling it up, and then I'll turn the camera back on once I get to that position. So if you see here, I'm working with the shifter. Now, I've stuck a zip tie right inside of where that little push pin part will stick out and attach itself to the cassette. So by doing this to both the one here, another one here, and there's another one that I can't really get access to in there, but if I just use a screwdriver and pry that part out, because I have the zip ties on the other 2 sections, keeping it so that the little push pins part, they're not pushing in on the black part, what's gonna happen is I'll be able to remove the white piece, the little plastic piece in here, along with the shifter from the shifter cassette. Since I have a replacement piece right here, I'm not gonna really worry about this. So if I damage it, it's not the end of the world because I have a new one. However, if you don't have a new piece, be very careful when you're taking this out, because if you damage any one of like the little clips, if you damage any of these little things, the little like pieces that come out, you won't be able to have a nice secure fit afterwards. Okay, so here we go, about 15 minutes later. I was able to pop out, see that like the little white part? I was able to pop that up, and it's just something to note, if you guys are gonna try and use this method that I'm using with the zip ties, use the larger zip ties. See this little one right here? It wasn't really thick enough and strong enough to hold each one of like those little clips in. So you can see this one that I have right here is a lot thicker and stronger than this little one. So use these big ones, and by doing that, see how the entire thing came out? Well, once you have it at this point, grab a set of pliers and you can pull the entire white piece up, if you can get a grip on it. Like that. Then from here, this little white part we can pull up and slide it off of the ball from the shifter. We'll slide that out. And then from here, we should be able to maneuver it and get the shifter mechanism out. Now, I'm kind of figuring out how to do this stuff all on the fly. So next up, we need to remove the shifter from this little side piece right here. And if you can tell, there's like a little plastic piece that needs to be pushed out. And I just used a set of picks to just push out the little section of it. And from there, we should be able to slide this part through and then get the shifter out. Like that. Once you have that little washer removed from the side of the shifter, we're gonna put that aside, and then we're gonna have to pry out this little C-clip found on the side of here. Now, what I'm gonna be doing to take it off is I'm just gonna be putting a flathead screwdriver behind here and like twisting it slightly. So what's gonna happen is that little clip is gonna slide out. And once we have it out, like that, that's what it looks like. We can slide the shifter mechanism slightly out a bit, and that's gonna give us enough room to move the shifter out. And there we have it. So there is our old shifter. This is our shifter mechanism, and here's the new one. So if we take a look at them, it looks like we can set it up so that the shifter is at the exact same spot as OEM if we keep it down there at the lowest setting. Now, because this is adjustable, the Craven Speed one, we can have it down there like OEM, or if we move the pivot point up more, what's gonna happen is we're gonna have more leverage over the transmission, which results in shorter shifts. So that means that the distance going from, say, gear 1 to 2 is gonna be much less when we have this pushed all the way up. Now, something else to note is that the OEM shifter came with a little O-ring like this. Now, when I took my entire shifter cassette out, this was just sitting on the bottom piece of it. So it was just lying there like that. Now, if you want to replace this with a new one, which I advise you should, what I did is I picked up on Amazon this little O-ring kit. So it's a little kit that has a bunch of different sizes. You're going to find out which one is your size, which it looks like it's this one maybe, or actually one over here. And you're going to reinstall this back onto the shifter. So keep the old one, and it's going to give you an idea as to what size you need for the new one. And if you can tell, right there, that's our proper size. Now, it's not the same color as OEM, but I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. It's going to have the same function. So what happens is when you shift through the gears right here, and say you shift really hard, you're not going to be damaging the inside part of the cassette because you're going to have rubber stopping that little piece. So the way that it worked is essentially you had a little O-ring over top of that little ridge, like that. And when you shift it into gears, you wouldn't get plastic on plastic. And if you shift hard, especially with our new one, you're not going to have metal on plastic, which means you're not going to be wearing it down even faster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this one off right here, put a little bit of lube from the OEM shifter on there, and then slide it over our Craven Speed shifter on there like that. So at this point, the shifter is ready to be reinstalled back into the cassette. Now, it's very simple. This is a pretty straightforward reinstallation because everything that we did was take apart. Now, what we're gonna be doing is putting this all back together. So we're gonna reinstall our shifter, and then we're gonna install the little shifter retainer clip pro back over top. Now, if you didn't damage your piece right here from BMW, or from Mini, if you didn't damage this, you can reuse this piece 100%. But because we have this new one right here that's meant for the shifter, and it goes like that, because we have a new one, I don't need to use the old one. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna reinstall this back in there and start putting everything back together. So first things first, what I'm gonna do is gonna reinstall this into there, push that piece back over top, like so. And then this little clip right here that we just took off, we're gonna reinstall back on. So everything that we're gonna be doing right now is just in the reverse order of what we already did. Now, I forgot to mention that when you're putting all this stuff back together, wherever you saw a component that was lubricated, it's very important to reinstall and re-lubricate everything once we put it back together. That way everything's gonna work properly, nothing's gonna be, wearing out prematurely. So what I have right here is some 3M silicone paste. I'll have a link for some in the description box. And you're just gonna coat anything that was lubricated from before. Now if there's any excess, we can wipe it off. You just wanna make sure that everything shifts and operates as it should. Nothing should feel sticky, nothing should really grab. Everything should work just like how it was designed. So right here, I'm just pushing that clip back over top to lock all this in place. So once we have the short shifter installed into this side piece right here, we're gonna grab some more 3M silicone paste, apply a little bit on the inside part of like that little clip that we removed for in here. So it's pretty straightforward, just grab it in here, squeeze it, and then push it forward until it's fully recessed into the shifter. Now there should be a proper way that this goes, and there's like a little groove on the side of here. Once you have it in, the shifter shouldn't have any play inside of there. And any extra lube or grease that we have, grab a towel and just clean it up. Now to install this piece right here over top of the shifter, we need to remove the top part of the short throw shifter, which threads off, which is right there. And you also need to remove this piece. Now the reason why we need to do this is because we need to slide this over top of all of it, and it's not big enough for it to all slide over. So slide it like that. This goes over top. Now before we go ahead and clip it in, I'm gonna grab some more 3M silicone paste and lube all of this up. Rub it in there until it's all nicely lubricated. So then at that point, you can slide this over top. Try not to get it on the shaft of the shifter. And then whenever you're ready, you're gonna pull this up so you can slide the mechanism over top, and then the shifter should slide in to place. Now when it's properly seated, each one of those like little clips will push out into the base of the cassette. So I'll give you right here a close-up of how all this should work. So once we play around with the shift knob, it should be lubricated, everything should move nicely, and each one of the clips on the inside should be pushed in. So like this, we can go ahead and reinstall this back on the car. Now before we go ahead and do that, I'm first gonna be pushing out each one of the little bolts and then pulling up each one of the rubber grommets to replace them with these aluminum ones. Now between every shift, what's gonna happen is all the energy that's coming from the shifter when you change gears, it's gonna have a little bit of slack because of the rubber grommets here, 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 and here. Now if you replace them with the aluminum ones, with the included bolts that Craven Speed gives you, you're gonna have much better response, you're gonna have a much quicker shift once all of this is done and over with. Now I went ahead and removed the rubber grommet and the bolt that we had attached to the shifter. So because I'm replacing them with the aluminum ones, the way that I'm gonna remove the bolt and then the rubber grommet is like so. So I'm gonna be pushing down on the bolt first, and then from the bottom side, I'm gonna grab a set of pliers and essentially squeeze it and pull it down. Now when I do that, see how the bolt's in there? Oops. Once I grab it and push down, it'll pull it through. Now I'm gonna set aside the aluminum piece and the bolt, only because it's not mandatory for the installation right now. But all you're doing is pulling it down. There's your bolt. And then at that point, you're gonna be pushing up on the rubber grommet and you're gonna be pulling it upwards. And there you go. So there's the rubber piece. And that's our aluminum piece. Now I'm gonna be using the new bolts that Craven Speed gives you for this installation when we attach this back up to the car. Now that we have our OEM shifter out, along with the old bolts and grommets, we can set all that stuff aside and we can go ahead and reinstall all of this back onto the car. So we're not gonna install each one of these yet because on the bottom side, if you remember, we took the cables out and we need to reattach them down there. So we're gonna go move back to underneath the car. We're gonna bring our silicone paste because we're gonna re-grease our shifter cables, and then we're gonna reinstall all of this stuff back together. So back underneath the car, if we take a look at both of our cables, you note that there's a little bit of grease on each end of it. Now because we're down here, we might as well service them and take a look at them. So if they start to look dry, grab the 3M silicone paste, apply a little bit on there, and then rub it onto the lines. Now once you shift, what should happen is that the lube will pull itself into the cable and you're gonna be lubricating that end of it. Now, it only lubricates it once you shift, so right now it's just gonna stay like that, but once we shift, it's gonna pull it in, out, and then lubricate everything. Now, once this is all said and done, it should operate and shift very smoothly. For convenience sake, I just went ahead and installed the shifter cassette up to the car, and I installed one bolt through the side of it so it would hold up in place. Now, I also went ahead and installed the lines, so I pushed the cable lines into here, and if you remember, there was a little clip found over here and here that we removed when we had to take out the cables from the car. Now we're installing them. We're gonna have to grab them, push them behind the cable, and I'm probably gonna have to get a hammer to hit them to get them to install properly. Now you're gonna do that for both this cable and this one, and then at that point, you're gonna go ahead and install each one of these ends onto the shifter. So we've got this one here for the bottom one, and this one right here for the main part of the shifter. So last but not least, this is how the entire shifter mechanism should look like once we're done. So we've got the cables installed at this end, we've got the two parts over here connected up to the shifter, and now we just have the 3 remaining bolts to attach the cassette up to the body of the car. Now once we have that done, we're gonna put the shifter cassette cover, that little piece back on the bottom, then the heat shielding for the entire exhaust system down here, and then hook the exhaust back up. After that, we're done on the bottom of the car. Now back inside the car, we've got the mechanism and everything all installed, and this is how the shifter works. So right now I have this set up to the OEM setting, so this is the exact same thing, the exact same throw as our OEM shifter. So that's the distance that we get. Now, the beauty with this kit is that you can adjust fully how much adjustability, how much of a throw you want here. Now, most kits that you're gonna find that are aftermarket for a vehicle like this, what they're gonna do is they're gonna have that sort of adjustment. And by that I mean that's the height that it's going to be at for an aftermarket short throw shifter. Now at this point, the bottom part of the shifter, so the bottom part of the mechanism that's down here is touching the shift cassette cover. So that cover is rubbing against these cables. Now if you want even more of a throw, what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna go underneath the car and keep that shifter cover out. So the cassette cover does not go installed at that point. So this right here is as low as it goes. I'm gonna take the shifter cassette out and I'm gonna come back to the interior and show you how much more room we have. So back inside, with our shifter cassette now removed, I'm gonna go ahead and adjust the short throw shifter again. So watch the shift knob drop as we can shift it and adjust it that much more from there to there, okay? Watch this. See that? So that extra drop that we had made a huge difference on how much distance we have for the throw. And that right there is how we install our fully adjustable short throw shifter. Now it's entirely up to you if you want to keep this removed. However, if you want that extra short throw distance, that's how we do it using our Craven Speed short throw shifter. Now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall the center console piece back on to show you how to install the Craven Speed shift well cover. So back on the interior of the vehicle, this is how the car should look like once you have the shift knob and the shift boot removed. Since I don't have them on the car, this is where we're at now. So with the short throw shifter, you're gonna take off the top piece, right there, we're gonna take that off, and we're also gonna take off the bottom part here for the short throw adapter. That's where you're gonna adjust how much of a throw you want. So we're gonna leave it like that. Now next up for the installation, we're gonna have this little piece right here, which is a piece of plastic with a little rubber grommet found on the center of it. So we're gonna install this, but before we do that, inside our shift well cover kit, we're gonna have a little spring, okay? And that's our spring that we slide over top of the shifter, and it sits on top of the little ball on the shifter, okay? Next up, grab your little plastic piece. Now you can have it so that you have like the textured surface facing up, or you can have the gloss surface face up. Now because most of the Mini's interior looks like this, I'm gonna have it like that. Slide it over top of the shifter and down below the threads for the short throw adapter part. Next up, we're gonna attach this shift well cover. And this piece right here has two little prongs on the top of it. Okay, and those prongs need to be facing 12 o'clock. So they need to be facing forwards, and they're gonna go in between that little groove. So once you have that piece over top, we're gonna slide this on there, align it, and just push down. So once we push it down into place, it'll snap in place like that, and it'll look perfect. This piece right here is to replace your OEM shift boot and the bezel around it. So if you like this look, you can by all means go ahead and install it. And I actually really like this look. So once you have that done, you're gonna push your shift knob on, tighten it in place, and then we're done. So from gear 3 to gear 4, this is the distance for our throw. That is our OEM shift height. And you can see that this is, you know, it's not horrible, but it could be a lot better. Now if we go ahead and adjust the little knob to the lowest setting, you can see how much shorter our throw is. Now again, our throw is going to be very dependent on the style of shift knob that we have. So because this shift knob that I have right here is very high, the throw is going to be a lot longer than if you had a shifter that was this height. Because at this point, you're going from here, which is about this distance, which is ridiculously tiny. So at the end of the day, it's entirely up to you. Now the beautiful part about this kit is that you can adjust this on the fly, so you can choose OEM or aftermarket in a matter of seconds. So I set this up right here to be the same kind of throw that you'd see for a stock shifter on this Mini. So if we take a look at the distance on here, we've got about 4.5 inches of travel, okay? Now if I adjust this to the short throw shifter, I want to see what the measurement is for this. So from 4.5 to 3. That's a huge difference. Now, at the end of the day, you guys can choose whatever kind of height you want with an adjustable shifter like this, whether if you want something really high and a long throw or something very short and very aggressive. Now, it's entirely up to you. I'm probably gonna stick it right in the middle, like that, lock it in place, and then put my shift knob right over top of this. Now, when it came to it, would I say that this job is very easy? Yes, but it's a pretty lengthy process. So there was a lot of stuff that I had to take off the car to get all of this to work. So if you guys are lucky enough that if you guys can change your short throw shifter and do it all on the inside, there's no exhaust or heat shielding you have to drop, that's awesome, and your job is gonna be a lot easier when you're installing this on your car. Now, if you guys wanna pick up any of the products that I use today, whether it be the short throw shifter, the Retainer Clip Pro, the shift well cover, or even any of the tools that I used, you guys can check the description box and you'll have links for everything there. If you guys have any questions regarding the video, throw them down in the comment section below, and I'd be more than happy to help. Okay guys, thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.